With a career spanning almost 50 years, Tony Brassel is racing media royalty. He's going to talk to us about some of the great horses he's seen, a few tips on how to do the form. Tony, it's wonderful to catch up.
Thanks a lot, Adam. Very pleased to be here and talk about my favourite subject, racehorses.
Let's get straight into this incredible career you had, and it started at the age of about 16 or 17.
Yeah, well, as soon as I left school, I just joined the Sportsman, and Kenny Callender was my first boss. Such an inspiration. Of course, my dad was a racing journalist, Tom. Our whole family just immersed in horse racing. But the formative years in the media, newspapers, and became editor at 27 years old, and yeah, it was great. That was the time of Kingston Town and some fantastic racehorses, so it was a thrill to get to the races every week.
Then after that, you started something quite revolutionary at the time in Clock Speed. Tell us a little bit about that and some of the clients that you had.
Clock Speed was a publication that was produced on desktop publishing. It preceded the internet. Jockeys like Shane Dye and the Stewards, Colt Tidy, the great bookmaker, they were subscribers. Kenny Callender, of course. And yeah, it was just a bit different, timing the sectional times of horses. So, you know, we beat the current technology by 20 odd years or so, but it was just jog shuttling VCRs and, you know, sort of mundane sort of things, but it gave a great result in terms of finding acceleration.
You mentioned Kenny Callender being your first boss there at the Sportsman. Talk about legends in racing. It must have been an incredible learning experience to work with Kenny.
Well, it was. Yeah, he just lived and breathed horse racing too. Fantastic punter, had great connections, Kerry Packer for one. And yeah, I used to work on the right-hand side of Kenny. We all know that Kenny has a nickname called Deafy, and the reason is he was deaf in the right ear. So every time I had to talk to Deafy, I'd have to get out of my seat and go around and talk into his left ear. But yeah, he just smiles every time we call him Deafy.
The defining horse, the horse that first made you think, wow, who was that?
Well, I can tell you I was about 12 years old, and it was the first time I'd ever been to a Golden Slipper. And a Melburnian called Vane came up to take on the Sydneyite Special Girl. I think it was the 1969 Golden Slipper.
Spot on.
Yep. And well, Special Girl was a freak. She'd won something like 5 from 5, and Sydney fell in love with her, and we just thought she was over the line. George Moore rode her. I'd seen her in a couple of barrier trials. Dad took me to the barrier trials, and she was over the line as far as I was concerned. And here was this Vane. It just came from nowhere. Went straight to the lead, led by 3, and absolutely trounced her. She was actually unplaced at the finish. And I was just so shocked that my favourite horse at the time had just been rolled.
And what was it like in a Sydney press room to see that? Because people talk about the Melbourne-Sydney rivalry now, but it's been there forever.
100%, Adam. Like the Melbourne journos, when they'd come up to the Sydney carnivals, a lot of the time they wouldn't even watch the Sydney races. They'd be looking at the AFL and things like this. But yeah, they were always great company, those guys. You know, there was a camaraderie between all racing journalists, let's face it.
A race that will stick with you forever. Obviously you said Vane early on, but along the way, is there another race where you'll just never forget that moment?
Well, the moment at Randwick when Superimposed won his 4th big mile there, when he won the Doncaster Handicap. And yeah, it was just something out of this world, a horse to win all 4 of those big miles, which are some of the best races you'll ever see. Well, he's just jumped from nowhere to win all 4 of those races, and people at the races, they were just cheering, and the crowd was manic for about 3 minutes after he came back into the enclosure.
Yeah, that was that 1991 Doncaster, and what a horse he was. I mean, to see him in Cox Plates, Melbourne Cups,
yeah.
Just incredible versatility.
I sort of semi-discovered him too, because he went around in a welter at Randwick. He came up here for a summer cup program. Now, I don't think he'd won a black type race at all. Here he was with 62 kilos or something in a welter. He ran second from memory, and he's flashed home, and I was doing the clocking at that time. I couldn't believe the figures he posted. So there he was in the Summer Cup next start, Shane Dye aboard, and he was 7-2 into 5-2 or something from memory. And I just said to all my in-laws and relatives, I said, get your Christmas money out of this. This is the best thing I've ever seen go around. There he was shooting 3 lengths clear. It was fantastic.
Doing the form. Now, we could talk for an hour about the tips on doing the form, but is there one or two little things. If there's people watching out there and they're interested in getting a little more serious about it, are there a couple of things they should look for?
Okay, well, the one thing I think you should really concentrate on is backing horses from top-level trainers ridden by top-level jockeys. There was a famous American punter from years ago called Pittsburgh Phil, and he always said that you have a big bet on a good horse ridden by a good jockey, and that's the number one rule. If you've got a few little queries about situations, just back off a little bit. But if you've got a top jockey and a top horse, it's pretty hard to beat.
Yeah, it certainly is, and a lot of punters certainly feel that way. Look, we've got some really big races coming up this weekend, and I'm sure it'll spark memories for you. So let's go through them and see if you can come up with a bit of a memory from each of them. The Australian Cup.
Well, the number one Australian Cup I can recall was Let's Elope, who of course won a Melbourne Cup and a Caulfield Cup, but in a fairly small field, I think 8 runners or something. She won the Australian Cup in round about 2 minutes and zoomed up from last. That was her trademark racing style too.
You were trackside that day?
Yeah, I was trackside. Usually, immersed in the Sydney scene, but I had the chance to get down there for Racetrack magazine and report on that, and wouldn't have missed it for the world.
The Newmarket Handicap?
Placid Ark, he was the standout for me, the West Aussie, fantastic sprinter, very deceptive. He went much quicker than you actually thought he was going. Clocked him a couple of times, and again, a case of looking at that stopwatch and saying, crikey, how fast did that horse go?
There was a story came out saying, from his connection, saying he would have been competitive with a Black Caviar. True or false?
I think true, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, super fast horse.
The Coolmore Classic for the fillies and the mares. Is there a moment in history there?
Yeah, big grey filly that was always dear to my heart, Emancipation. Ronnie Quinton used to always ride her for Neville Begg, and she had a few quirks. She bit Graham Begg a couple of times. He used to strap her, and that's what happens with those mares. But she won a Coolmore Classic with 60 kilos, but she was a 3-year-old.
Wow.
And that is a phenomenal effort for a youngster like that. She just put them away in 3 strides.
I know this is said lightly with all the great mares we've seen lately, but does she sit up there in the mares?
She does. She was sort of effective in that 1400 metre mile zone. She could sprint at 1600 metres, but she was a little bit better. So I think Black Caviar might have had the edge on her in those shorter races.
It's been an absolute delight catching up, hearing a little bit about the background and getting your thoughts on what we've got coming up over the next few weeks. Thank you.
Would never have missed it, Adam.